Christians be like, God's gonna get me home. And then Christians be like, why isn't my life moving anywhere? God's not doing anything. Ah!
What's up, everyone? So I'm here with Alex Whitley.
What's up, guys?
And Angelica Katelyn.
What's going on?
And we're here to actually discuss Christian creativity and how we can further push that. You might be seeing this on my channel, either like the same time as I drop this video or maybe like tomorrow, whenever it's gonna be. But we actually just met for the first time on Friday, right? And first time in person. However, we've been like doing a lot of like video cam and webcam type practices because we recently I was about to say starred, but that wasn't the case. But we recently did a performance at Creation Fest 2018. We are spoken word artists. Some of you have already seen some of my content. These are phenomenal spoken word artists, and like I said, I'm gonna post the whole performance like on the channel soon, so be on the lookout for that. But yeah, we've just been having like lots of like great conversations. And before we get into what we're gonna talk about today, because it's gonna kind of segue into it, how did y'all feel about the whole experience?
Yeah, so we, like Denzel said, we met on Friday for the first time, and yesterday was when we performed, and today is Sunday. So it's been really the course of 48 hours that we've even been in each other's presence, and it feels like almost like a week or longer, because we've had so much content in our discussions. It was really, really special to me, at least, because the actual performance was nothing of what I expected it to be. I guess in my mind I had kind of envisioned like a stage and like an open setting and like maybe like fans going or it would be more of like a clean, clear-cut environment. And we got there, and I mean, there was just dusty roads, and there was lawn chairs of people just sitting out everywhere. There was flies. It was 95 degrees. We're sweating, and it was really crazy because sometimes you think of faith-based things, or at least for me, I think of things that are presented, at least in contemporary Christian content, as being flawless. Oftentimes we see these big worship nights, we see the lights, we see the camera angles, we see the guys that are wearing the cool Adidas shoes, we're seeing the girls in the cute hats. Cliche over here. We see the girls in the cute hats and the hoop earrings, not to be cliche, but yeah, you know what I mean? Like there's a certain way that Christianity is given to us sometimes. And so for me, it was really cool to get to that festival, and it had been nothing of what I expected it to be. We were performing on wooden planks with dirt and mud and rocks all around us, and those were the best times that I've ever seen them perform, or that I've ever performed my pieces. Definitely that Denzel and I did our piece. That was the best we've ever done our piece together. And it was just insane. We'd only known each other for 24 hours, and we're performing together, glorifying God in the midst of all this mess and heat and sweat and
mosquitoes,
but to
loud
me,
coffee machines, people screaming out Marco.
To me, that's the gospel though, right?
Yeah.
Like if Jesus came into the world in the middle of a mess, like we're supposed to be able to preach his word to the world in the middle of messes, right?
That's profound. That's profound.
Yeah, and so for me, like, I enjoyed the performance, but I honestly loved being with them probably more so. Like me and Denzel drove together for 4 hours before meeting Angelica, and we just had incredible conversations. And a lot of the conversation we had is what we're going to talk about today.
Yeah.
And that just came naturally because we both kind of share this passion and just burden. Yeah. So the performance was great. We had a blast with that. But I think just the conversations, the laughter, man, it's so cool to have like a community of other creatives that you connect with. And I think that's been my favorite part this weekend. So.
Yeah, absolutely. Like I said, you guys are going to be able to check out the whole full performance. We've already given you a heads up. It's not this huge stage, the lights and all of that, but it's a small wooden plank. I'm telling you, I'm warning you right now before you watch it, you'll see flies just flying around. It's that natural of a state. Yeah, you'll sometimes see me swat at one. I'm playing Jesus, and Jesus whoa, got it. It's crazy, but it's fun. And I love what Angelica said, that in the midst of a mess, that's when you should be able to still, preach. You should still be able to, connect. And yeah, it was a great experience being with these guys. But anyway, so you guys can check that out when I post it. Today, like I said, we're going to be talking about Christian creativity, and this is something that me and Alex started. This is something I've been thinking about for a long time, you guys.
Same.
I've been watching, my channel. If you've noticed, you guys have been following me, you've been seeing my thoughts. I've been coming, and I've already warned you guys I'm going to be talking about some things upcoming, like my Heart of an Evangelist video, where pretty much I'm going to be discussing a lot of things that, wow.
That was so scary. The spirit is moving, y'all.
I'm going to be discussing a lot of things that might be controversial to, the stereotypical Christian and all of that, but this is kind of what I want to do. I want to be a troublemaker of some sort to really help push the gospel better, to help us adapt better. And it's nice to know that I know people who actually love Jesus. I know these two actually love Jesus, and they agree with the things that I was thinking, the things that I was saying, that some things need to change, some things we need to help other Christians realize you guys are in a box. And so I had these two watch a video called Why Christian Music is Bad, and right about now you should be seeing a blurb coming off at the top if you guys want to go check that out. And I had them take notes. This is about to be raw conversation. You guys know how my channel is. I have a lot of people feature on there where we have just raw conversation, and I told them we're not going to discuss it until we get on camera. So now I'm throwing the meat out there. Who's gonna try and take the first bite?
I'll take it. Okay. So going back to what we talked about earlier, one of the things that when it comes to Christian creativity, and I think music in particular, there's this pressure within Christian community that anything you ever create, a poem, a song, spoken word, a book, everything, it has to always explicitly include the gospel. Unless you're giving an altar call message in a song, it's not right Christian material. And I don't
Jesus
think
doesn't like it.
Yeah, I don't think I could disagree with that more. So before I give my input as to why, I would love to hear that from you guys.
I 100% agree with that. You're not familiar with my previous videos, but I talk about this stuff all the time. My videos, I don't always explicitly although I pull out the Bible a lot of times in my videos to give analogies as to my life advice, the ones where I was talking about the bow and the arrow and everything. I used the description with the walls of Jericho and everything. I use a lot of analogies from the Bible, but not every video is me explicitly saying Jesus and blah 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 blah, and I think that's been more effective, especially even in my coaching. It's been more welcoming, it's been more inviting. But I know a lot of Christians, they'd see me as to be someone who's maybe hiding my faith or keeping it in the back pocket or something. And it's well, even if it may appear that way, I'm drawing in more people, and it's not a competition,
right?
But I'm drawing in more people.
Reach those.
Yeah, and by being my authentic self, by showing them Christ in me. I believe that you need to get to know me as a person and respect me as a person before I can get you to actually take my word when I say that this friend of mine, Jesus, is also a really cool person. Because I can't just have you skip over me, you know what I mean? Because then it's well, why should I believe that Jesus is a great person when I don't even know you yet? That's kind of how I feel. But all of these songs, they don't even really talk much about themselves, and if they do, it doesn't really go that deep. It's oh, you're a good father, it's who you are. And it's okay, that's cool, but pretty much I don't see myself to be an entertainer for Christians. I'm going out to reach souls that are not necessarily as Christians. So we need the Christian entertainers out there, but I think that we also need the people who will leave the castle of Christianity, go out into the woods and make friends with those who are out in the woods and be you're from that big castle over there? What? Well, if there's more people there like you, and then they start being woven into it. I always tell people that I'm not here to coerce my faith onto you, but I'm here to understand your perspective so well that I could argue it, and hopefully you could do the same thing with mine. That way, even if you don't want to believe in Christianity, you don't put your faith in it, it'll at least be on valid reasoning, and you could completely understand why I put my faith in it, and I could completely understand why you haven't. And that's why I have my series Misconceptions on Christianity, to fix a whole bunch of misconceptions. So yeah, that's how I feel about it. not everything has to be so explicitly Jesus this, Jesus that. You need to give people milk before they start taking meat, oftentimes.
And the best example, what we talked about, and it's in the video as well, the best example of someone doing this that is extremely controversial is Lecrae. And I absolutely love what Lecrae is doing. I read a book recently, and I was thinking about this during the video. It's called Chasing Francis. And there's a quote in the book by this like friar from the 1300s. And I'm going to read you guys the quote. So he says this, he's talking about art and beauty. And he says, if I can find it. Yeah, he's talking about art, and he says, you can make art about the light, or you can make art that shows what the light reveals about the world. And so if you were to change that word light for gospel, you can make art about the gospel, or you can make art that shows how the gospel affects the world. And that is exactly what Lecrae is doing. And so that's why I guess this opinion, man, all this is opinion that, you know, I don't think you have to write a song or a spoken word, anything where it gives an altar call for people, where it says Jesus died on the cross for your sins. You can write something, like it's okay to do that as well, but like you can totally write something that talks about how the gospel affects the way you view some part of the world. Like the gospel totally affects how we view social injustice. It affects how we view racial equality. And so it's so okay. And I think Christian creativity should enter these areas more, and being okay with giving our honest input into these issues rather than always feeling like it has to just say Jesus. Rather, I think we can talk about what Jesus sees in the world and how he views it.
Exactly. You didn't even get to answer the question, by the way, so I wanted to give you that.
No, I mean, I definitely agree with what you guys are saying. I think there's also like a balance that there has to be, right? So once you're fully in faith, or once you have fully accepted Jesus as your Savior, or you know, have you dedicated your life to following him, I think that there is a balance between, like for me, the Good Father song is one of my favorite songs. Like there's some songs that are like, Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble. Jesus, Jesus. You know, some of those songs completely break me down to where I feel God in ways that I can't even explain in words almost. A person that doesn't know Jesus is not going to hear Jesus, Jesus, you make the darkness tremble and connect their heart in the same way that I'm going to.
Yeah.
Yes.
For me, I have experienced and encountered Jesus in a way that song is so powerful to me. But for a non-believer, it's different, and we have to find ways of reaching non-believers. I recently just performed both of my spoken word pieces for a bunch of my coworkers where I'm working right now in the Hamptons, and it was a whole room of mostly non-believers, and they didn't really know what to expect, and I ended up performing my pieces, and at the end, each of them individually came up and gave me a hug and told me how much they were moved by it. And even the people that didn't agree with what I said about God necessarily, or didn't relate to it, they were like, I didn't necessarily like believe what you were saying about certain aspects about God, because that's not my personal beliefs, but I felt what you were feeling, and I felt the way that you were connecting. And for me, I think that the gospel should start with the feelings, right? There's Carl Lentz spoke at my church recently this past year, and he was talking about how there was a man outside of church, a homeless guy with a veteran's hat on, and he had a beer in his hand. The guy was really dirty, sitting in an alleyway outside of the church, and Carl Lentz, if you're familiar with him, preaches out of a club in New York City. And so he said that he invited this guy into church, and the guy said, you know, man, I can't go anywhere without this beer. And Carl said, okay, well, let's get you a beer then, and come to church with me. So he went down the street, bought this guy a 40 at the gas station, and they went into the church together. He had him sitting on the front row with him. Little did this homeless man know that Carl was the preacher. Right. And he said that the guy started out watching worship and watching the sermon with the beer in his hand. And by the end of the sermon, the man had the beer down on the ground and had full hands up in surrender and worship. And he said that after the sermon, a woman came up to him and said, you know, Carl, I've followed you in a lot of the ways that you've gone outside of the box in your faith and outside of the box in the gospel and Christianity, and this is just too far. There was a man on the front row today with a beer in his hand, and she said, I can see his sin. And he said, and ma'am, I can smell your pride. And he said, at some point, we have to start looking at people for their souls and not their sin.
Yes.
Right? So if we look at people based on the idea that if Jesus has transformed our lives and the way that Jesus' life has impacted us, if we look at our mission as to love and to connect to other people that are just as broken as we were and just as broken as we still are, but have only found grace through redemption of Christ, if we look at people for souls and connect with them in that way, God's supposed to deal with the conviction, right? So we're supposed to be there to love and share things with them and relate to human beings, right? Christianity shouldn't be a Christian thing. It should be a human thing. And it shouldn't be about rules of how music or creative outlets should be structured. It should be about a relationship.
Oh, yeah.
And that's where that wall breaks, you know?
Yeah. I wanted to say something real quick. So my fiance, y'all know Jamila. Me and her talk about this stuff like all the time. We have very, very similar outlooks on this, well, pretty much the same outlooks. And this was a thread of tweets that she posted. It's from the Bible for, all of y'all Christians. So in 1 Kings, not all of, we're Christians too, but you know what I mean. The legalistic ones or whatever. So in 1 Kings 4, it talks about how Solomon, the wisest man who ever lived, knew thousands of proverbs and wrote thousands of songs. It then goes on to say what he spoke about, from trees to fish. People ran to hear his wisdom. What was listed was not directly about God, though. Yet, we know that his wisdom was God-given and God-honoring. So whatever platform you use, as long as you are inspired by the wisdom and truth that comes from God, it will be God-honoring. Solomon talked about birds and people were hyped to listen. Not because birds are so universally interesting, but because Solomon was so unique and blessed in his understanding that people wanted more. Be so prepared and good at your message, your craft, your skill, your talent, whatever, that people want to hear more. Because if they respect the message, they will respect the source. Be so committed to wisdom and truth that even the alphabet sounds good from your point of view. And then I just switched page. Oh yeah. I know an artist who is a Christian. I know as an artist who is a Christian, like us, people want to discourage us from speaking, singing, writing, etc. about anything that isn't directly religious or spiritual. We are put in a box that is in a lot of ways ineffective in terms of the greater cause. Write that song. Make that video. Be passionate about that craft. Be so good and so wise that you attract people to you and therefore your source. I think that was so wonderfully put, especially deriving from the Bible itself. Like literally, it's so true. Like what Solomon was saying, like it had nothing to do with God saying this, blah blah blah. But like I love like one thing that I've noticed about Angelica, for those of you like MBTI geeks, ESFP, she loves to see, like she looks at nature, like stereotypical thing. She's like, wow, guys, look at that.
To the point it's annoying.
And she's like, it depends on who it is, of course. But yeah, that's just how she is.
I have no idea.
She'll notice stuff that like maybe like most people would just be like, yeah, like not that it's not beautiful, but to her it's just like, guys, look at that amazing skyline. Guys, look at that water. Look at that tree. Look at this.
They're really not exaggerating.
Whoa.
It's kind of embarrassing
That's
when they do it out
literally
loud.
how she was. And then me and Alex just like, oh yeah, that's cool. Not that it's not cool, but to us it just doesn't like it's appeal to us as much as it does to her. It's not a bad thing that she's like that. In fact, like y'all know, like MBTI, that's how they kind of are. Like there's people who just naturally like that's the type of stuff that they notice. For me, I tweeted the other day that like there's pretty much two things that always make me get into a state of awe of God. That is nature. Well, the first thing is of course personality. Like I love seeing the dynamics of people. I love seeing how different and intricate different human beings can be, stuff like that. I'm always observing how people interact, how people think, where their thought process come from. Y'all know me, stuff like that. And to me, when I observe and learn about all of that, it's literally like, wow, God, you're so amazing. You're so creative, because we have millions and thousands of people, and even though there's only 16 personality types, you can have several people of the same personality type, and even though you see similarities, you see so many nuances, so many differences from that. God, that's amazing. And it just makes me in awe and wonder of God. And the second thing will be nature. I'm not on Angelica's level, but when I do look at like a rainbow, when I do see like, certain birds, like the other day I saw an eagle in the wild for like the first time, and I was like, whoa, like I was taken aback. Like that was when I started to look like Angelica. Like, wow, look at that eagle, it's huge. Stuff like that. Like that makes me go like, wow, look at God, look at the birds, all of that. And that's not explicitly like, like saying God this or God that, but it's more of just like showing that like you can literally see God in anything, in the mountains, in people. And I guess the last thing I want to say about that is in my piece, one of the pieces that I performed, the thing that I was supposed to say, I kind of freestyled at this part, was, it is that freedom that allows us to explore all the more of what God has artistically designed, such as nature, that he has so heavily intertwined his own majesty into. So imagine how much more us, being image bearers, because we're created in God's image, thus we can find the glory of God himself, not only in the beauty of the outdoors, but also within ourselves. Understand that there are two components to our authenticity. The first and foremost is what God proclaims that we are, which is incredibly beneficial to know, so we're not discrediting that. But the second is just as important to grow, which is knowing yourself in the specific way God created you. Your personality is as vital as the different writers that scribbled the 4 Gospels.
Yes.
They each had a different piece to bring that ended up holistically demonstrating the whole thing, the whole picture, when brought together. It doesn't always take a Christian label and every statement being backed up with a verse, because out of the abundance of the heart, a scripture, the mouth flows. So, my brothers and sisters, if you're really Holy Spirit led, all you really need is to release your words.
Yeah.
Your words do not have to explicitly always say Jesus this or that or that or that. But just from what you're saying, people will be able to be like so caught, so interested, and then all of a sudden, like when you do mention Jesus, they'll be like, wow, so this is where all of this is coming from? And because they've fallen in love with it, then they're like, wow, okay, now I'm onto it. We discussed something on the way up here, and you crafted it into a nice quote, where I was pretty much saying something like, we have to present ourselves before we, like, not necessarily we have to present ourselves before we represent Jesus, but...
Oh, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah,
I know what
yeah,
you're talking about.
say
Okay,
it.
so I don't remember how I crafted it, but it's this idea. Oh yeah. I know exactly how I crafted it.
Awesome.
Got it. Okay. All right. So I do a lot of writing and I do a lot of study on like crafting stories. And if you've ever read a good book like Harry Potter, I'm a huge Harry Potter nerd. Harry Potter is so good because J.K. Rowling, who wrote it, she does a rule in writing: show, don't tell. And she does a lot of showing and don't tell you. Like, if you read a book and they're telling you everything as far as like showing you through action and dialogue, that's a great story. And I think Christian creativity, and just, I don't like saying Christian creativity in general is at its best when the creator of it is showing what they believe rather than telling you. And so I don't think our creativity has to always say like, you know, good Father, even though it's a great lyric, or anything explicitly like God is this. What if we could show what God is like through how he's impacted our lives and through our honest struggles?
Through our stories.
Yeah, through our stories. And so, but here's the beauty of that is that when you show like how God has impacted you in your life, and maybe through a struggle that you've been through or something you've dealt with, and shown God's faithfulness, you don't even have to mention God. But because people see your joy despite that, but because you're showing the enthusiasm, the endurance, the resilience despite all these things, people are going to question like, man, how are you still here? Like, how are you still doing this? And then it leads into a conversation of the gospel. So we're not saying the gospel is irrelevant, but maybe how we approach creativity better through our honesty and through our struggles and just through showing the gospel rather than telling it, I think would be more effective to reach people who don't know Jesus.
Yes,
So, yeah.
perfectly said.
Side note on that, I feel like that's completely true. And simultaneously, I think you have to remember that when there's always that chance of, because I know I've run into this lately, I've been interacting with a lot of non-believers lately, and it's been very challenging to feel like I'm not doing enough, or I'm not saying enough, or I'm not sharing enough. And from doing my pieces the other night and having so many people tell me like, I really felt you, like I might not believe that, but I really felt what you were feeling. I was trying to decipher what that meant, as far as like what God was trying to show me with that. And what I concluded, at least for my personal experience and for myself to kind of be able to sleep a little easier at night, is that I can only do so much to share what I know about God and to share creatively what I feel about God with others. If they're gonna become a believer, from a non-believer to a believer, that's only through God, right? So I can only be the vessel to show that, and then at some point I have to realize I'm doing everything that I can creatively and showing and living by example and doing whatever I can do to take those steps for them to question things. But at the end of the day, we also have to remember that, you know, though we are striving to bring others to salvation, God can only do that, right? That's not going to happen from us specifically. Conversations can spark and feelings can spark, but then again, the actual saving grace only comes from him.
Yeah, exactly. One thing that I also like to, I told them is that I feel like Christians have created their own subculture. Actually, I don't feel like, I know that they do. I go to Liberty University and I see that, you know, we have our own language, like Christianese, and, you know, like very, very churchy behavior and stuff like that. And it's almost like there's the world, and then there's like the small Christian world, which is like a few light years away from the actual world. And it's the shameful part is that we lack creativity because we're claiming that the world should come to us, but all of the things that we're doing is just cheap knockoffs of what the world is doing. So it's like, oh, y'all made hip hop? Well, we're gonna make Christian hip hop. Oh, y'all made rock? Well, we're gonna make Christian rock. And we're gonna go against yours, but we're gonna show how cool Jesus is with this. And it's like, not that Christian hip hop is bad, and when I say Christian hip hop, I mean stuff like KB, Trip Lee, who are explicitly Christian hip hop. Like every single song has to do explicitly about Jesus. Not people like Andy Mineo and Lecrae. I think that Andy Mineo is a perfect example of not necessarily someone who makes Christian hip hop, but who's just a regular rapper who happens to also be a Christian. Just like Tori Kelly is a regular artist, a regular singer who also happens to be a Christian. You don't always hear her saying Jesus this and blah 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 in her songs, but you can tell, like, you can fall in love with her music, get to talk to her and everything, and then all of a sudden through that, just like what Alex was saying, you end up like being like, wow, you want to get to the source, kind of like what Jamila was tweeting. I think that we've taken that verse where it says you are in the world but you're not of the world way too far, because now we're trying to completely separate. How are we supposed to impact the world if we completely separate ourselves from the world? You are supposed to have God so deeply innate, like in you, that when you go out into the world, you should still be in the world, but you're influencing it from the inside out. You are transforming the world just as Jesus transformed and renewed your mind from the inside. You're not completely going and becoming this whole different person, but you're redeeming it for what God, like, oh, this is cool, but I feel like this is how God is supposed to be, because this is how God intended for this to probably be, because God is truth. So anything that's truthful is God, you know, and it doesn't have to explicitly say Jesus. Now, we're not saying that every single thing that explicitly says Jesus is just horrible. No. But like I said, there's got to be like levels to this. And I think that we're on two extremes where it's like, oh, you didn't say Jesus 25 times in that song, so therefore it's not good. We don't want to put that Christian label on everything, because then we're only entertaining and performing for Christians. We're preaching to the choir. But our goal is to bring more people in. And in order to do that, we have to connect with them, and we have to give them the milk before we give them the meat. Just like what Angelica was saying previously, where they have to like know you. They have to like get to know like a person. Like I told y'all that joke. Like a lot of people like cheaply be like, oh, you know, like, oh, it wasn't me, it was God. And my professor, who's a Christian, one of my professors, he said that he saw a student like, you know, like perform whatever. He's like, hey, you did a great job up there and all of that. And then the student was like, oh, no, professor, it wasn't me, it was all God. And my professor's like, oh, really? Huh. Could have sworn it was you up there. Like, you get the joke. Like, why do we feel like we have to, you said it so beautifully, like we have to like affirm our faith in some way?
Can I add in there my own story?
Yeah, go ahead.
On Facebook recently, I talked about our performance. And I know this person was well-intentioned, so nothing against them, but it's just our Christian language sometimes. I used the word performance, and they said, don't perform, testify, because performance draws attention to ourselves, but testifying draws attention to God. They're so well-intentioned.
I know,
but,
right?
But it's just like, there's nothing wrong with the word performance. And I think sometimes we demonize these words when it's like, no, I'm going to go and perform.
Yes.
Because if I don't perform, people aren't going to pay attention, and they're not going to hear about the God I'm trying to give to them. So...
And it's crazy too,
so
like
well
you were
said.
talking about the how we put how Christians oftentimes put themselves in a separate world, and I think that is the main point and the main focus that that creativity should be about bridging that gap.
Yes.
Why is it, and I'm going to throw out some stereotypes pretty, bluntly, I guess here, but why is it that the Republicans are the Christians and are the people that are always following the Bible, and the Democrats are the artists and the ones that are free spirits that don't know God? Why is it that we have these literal boxes that we put ourselves in. For me, like, I love music festivals. I wear hippie pants. I enjoy listening to reggae music sometimes. Like, there are so many things that I like, and those don't make me any less in God because I enjoy those things. Where do we bridge that gap of I can love Jesus and I can love this type of music, or I can love Jesus and I can still be an artist and a creative, and I can glorify him through that creativity without always saying Jesus, Jesus. You know, there's such a, and that's, I think, what the main question is: how do we bridge that gap, and how do we, because a lot of things are being bridged. Like, a lot, you know, there's pastors that have full tattoo sleeves. There are pastors that talk openly about their struggles with depression and their struggles with anxiety or with their sins. Like, but those are the conversations and the stories that we need to hear to be able to bring salvation to the souls in need. The Bible is the biggest compilation of stories, impactful stories in the whole world. When do we start making each of our individual stories our modern day Bible that we're able to voice out to other people? You know, because that's what has to happen. I've been so scared because of my past and because of so many of my sins and the guilt and shame that I have from some of those things. I've always been so scared, really, until this spoken word piece, which has been was my first spoken word endeavor that I've ever kind of taken on.
So phenomenal.
Thank you, guys.
I can't wait till you guys see the video.
But it was my first piece, and I was like, you know, how do I write about these things that I've been shameful about? And then I was like, no, I have to write about these things that I've been shameful about, because struggles with partying and struggles with relationships and struggles with lying and cheating and struggles with going against God are the things that people relate to, because other people are going through those same things or didn't know that Christians could go through those things,
right,
because they've seen Christians on this
polished
platform.
And I think one of my biggest frustrations, like earlier you were talking about like KB and other artists who explicitly a lot of their lyrics are really just Jesus. And here's the thing.
We need that to entertain the Christians, but
but just because someone goes outside of that and wants to get into social injustice or other issues, or just write a cool song that has a nice beat, like, just because they don't fit your box, it doesn't mean you need to criticize them. It doesn't mean like, oh my gosh, I was on Lecrae's Instagram the other day looking at his just new album released, Let the Trap Say Amen, and like people were commenting all this stuff about like, Lecrae, you sold out, like how could you go away from the Christian you once were, like all this stuff. And it's just like, just because he doesn't fit your box doesn't mean he's any less of a Christian than he once was, or loves Jesus any less. So I think the main thing is we need both. There's a balance of like, you can't have a worship song singing to God about a political issue. Of course not. But you can write a song about a political issue.
Because that's how you influence the world.
Right.
With the Christian worldview. And just like I was saying, like with that subculture, to finish that, I feel like we expect, so not only did we make carbon copies of everything and just label it Christian in this subculture, as well as having our own language there called Christianese and everything, but now we expect people to go through the work of taking a spaceship and flying all the way over to our puny little world where, you know, like, where we're doing everything the world is doing, only in a Christian way. And the thing is, first of all, it's too much work for them to take the spaceship to come over there. You know, like, only a few people like do that. Like, that's a lot of work to like take that spaceship. Second of all, they don't even really want to do that because they're looking at our world from a distance. They're seeing it from screens. I'm taking this analogy really far, but you guys continue to go with me. Like, they're looking at screens on what we're doing in our world, and they're like, you do that over here, and ours is better. Like, because we're more creative with it. They're limiting themselves with, oh man, I want to say all this stuff about me, but I can only make like a 4-minute song, and I still haven't said Jesus a 26th time yet. So let me just replace this authentic line with something about Jesus that doesn't really have to say anything about me.
Right.
That's dumb. Like, I'm sorry, but that's dumb. Like, Andy Mineo, we were talking about in my nuanced nudity video. We were talking. I was talking about like how my friend, she was like, yeah, I don't think that I can listen to Andy Mineo, and I can't even listen to him anymore, like when I'm fasting and stuff anymore. And Lecrae, because you know he cussed in he said the D word in his song or whatever. And me and Alex were like discussing that. We were like, what? Like, out of that whole EP, the first thing that I said was like, hey, did you hear Andy Mineo's EP? She was like, yeah, he cursed. I was like, wow, okay. My thing is, like Alex said, we need both, and that doesn't mean that you shouldn't criticize. And also, I want to acknowledge that there's still this thing called weaker brother, stronger brother in the Christian, like in the Bible and everything. Like Paul talks about it in 1 Corinthians, I believe, where there's some people who can actually, like, you know, like drink or whatever, not get drunk, but like, you know, they're okay with, like, you know, like alcohol or whatever. Let them be. Like, they can still be Christians. But if you're not comfortable with that in your own conscience, don't do it. So in the same sense, if you don't really like that type of music, if you feel like, oh no, if I listen to that type of music, like that's bad, all right, then yeah, don't do it. That's fine. But don't think that, or don't demonize the people who are actually like making that music or listening to that music or
feeling from that music or growing or learning or getting the gospel from that music.
Yes, exactly. I have a friend who he said that before he became a Christian, he used to be literally addicted to buying sneakers. He was like, he pretty much like was gluttonous about sneakers. So now that he's like saved and everything, he personally sees it to himself as a sin to go out and buy a whole bunch of sneakers. I totally understand that. Just like how somebody, they like, nah, I have a past with drinking or whatever, even though drinking is not a sin. Getting drunk is. And that's a whole other video for another day. I don't really drink, but yeah. I don't judge those who do either. But in the same sense, someone who's like, no, I have history with like music like that and everything, so I can't really go there. That's cool. I'm not about to like play that music for you then, like when you're in the car with me. But if I'm listening to it on my own time, don't judge me for it. Don't say like, oh, because I don't have that same struggle as you do. We all struggle with different things. So pretty much like what I'm saying is like, don't be slower to criticize those people. Be slower to say like, oh, that person's not a Christian anymore. Like this friend literally thinks that like Lecrae is like doing whatever, you know, like what was the comment that you said that was on Lecrae's thing and how Lecrae responded to it? This is
yeah. So the guy was talking about Lecrae's new album, and he said, Lecrae, I love. He said, Lecrae, your album. I think he was talking about Rehab. By the way, Lecrae's album Rehab is my favorite one ever, and he was saying like Rehab impacted me so much, like it transformed my life in all these incredible ways. But your music now just doesn't do that for me. And he was like, I hate how far you've fallen away. And Lecrae responded back, well, my music from 10 years ago is still available for your enjoyment and entertainment, with a smiley face. So, you know, it's like, just because it's not the same anymore, it doesn't mean you need to dehumanize them. And I even heard a pastor one time, I believe it was Michael Todd, he said, how could I ever criticize what God is using, even though I don't like it?
Wow.
Like, okay, Joel Osteen is obviously a very controversial guy to a lot of people.
Yeah.
But I can never in good conscience criticize anything he ever says or does when I look at genuinely people that are getting saved under him and how God is using him. And so it's just like, just because you don't like it or you disagree with it, don't criticize it if God is actually using it.
Yeah, just a quick side note, like off of Joel Osteen, like I have a friend who did get saved and everything, like, and he loves Joel Osteen. I personally don't really like prefer Joel Osteen for like several different reasons, but because I see how much this friend has been like growing and he's really like loving Jesus more off of what Joel Osteen is saying, God is clearly working through that. So I'm not about to like be like, no, don't watch Joel Osteen anymore. Right. I recommend other people for him to also to add on to what he already has on his plate. Like, okay, you're getting like some good food over here, but let's add some vegetables. I don't like vegetables, but like let's add some vegetables here, you know, like T.D. Jakes or like you know, Charles Swindoll, whoever. But you can still listen to your Joel Osteen, just so I'm making sure that you're still growing. But that doesn't mean I'm going to take off what you're already eating from your plate entirely, because it's not really poisoning you. As long as it's not poisoning you, but in fact it's helping you grow, then that's cool. But let's just add on to it a little bit more.
I also think that like there's a prayer that I have that I just pulled up a minute ago, but it says in this, it's a Thomas Merton prayer from Thoughts in Solitude. It says, my Lord God, I have no idea where I am going. I do not see the road ahead of me. I cannot know for certain where it will end, nor do I really know myself. And the fact that I think I am following your will does not mean that I actually am doing so. But I believe that the desire to please you does in fact please you. And I hope I have that desire in all that I am doing. I hope that I will never do anything apart from that desire. And I know that if I do this, you will lead me by the right road, though I may know nothing about it. And I think that's so important to remember, that as long as we have the desire as creatives and as Christians or as believers, however you define yourself as a believer, that if we have that desire to please God, that whatever we do is going to please God. As long as it is, you know, with that strong desire and with his heart and mind and the truth that we've gotten from him. I think that that's the stigmatism that we want to break, is you asking that girl, did you hear Andy Mineo's new song? And her first response is, yeah, he cussed. That is what we have to cut out of our worlds. Again, seeing people for sins and not their souls.
Wow.
Look at someone as a human being. And so I think that this whole discussion really encourages people on all levels. If you're the Christian that does put yourself in that box of, this is how it needs to be. Oh, he cussed, you shouldn't listen to it. Oh, this is happening.
Throwing out the baby with the bathwater.
Yes, take a challenge to step out of that and hear, oh, maybe there is a wider realm outside of these blinders that I'm putting on my eyes. Simultaneously, if you're a Christian creative, or if you're a creative that is or are doing things that are outside of the box, keep doing those and do more of them, because we need more of them. And thirdly, if you're a creative and you're a non-believer, realize that there are other people that have just as messy pasts and just as messy backgrounds and as many sins as you might think that you have, or as many inadequacies. The beautiful thing is remembering what you said. The thing about authenticity is knowing who you are and also knowing who God says you are to be. And I love the song that says, I'm blessed, I'm called, I'm healed, I am whole, I'm saved in Jesus' name, highly favored, anointed, healed in your power, right? We were all created in the image of God, and therefore the non-believers are created in the image of God. So every single person has that innate design from birth, whether you know it or not, as a believer or a non-believer, it's there. So even if you're somebody that worships demonic rock music, you were created in the image of God, and you can find that out of you based on other people's stories and the way that you relate to others that are aware of that in their own minds and are also trying to show that to the world.
That's beautiful.
And to go back to, me and Denzel talked about this in the car earlier, to back to the stigma of like cuss words and this idea, like we were talking about this, first off, like cussing is not a sin, and I don't think you can back that up in the Bible either, that it is a sin. And I think culture, like obviously, because we as Christians tend to view it that way sometimes, I think for the majority does, because we tend to say, oh, he cussed and I can't listen to that music, and because this is such a bad thing, culture outside of Christianity tends to say like, oh, cussing is bad, Christians shouldn't do that, because we reinforce that. And I think instead of like coddling to this idea like that cuss words are bad, I think if we just like break the stigma and just be like, cussing is not bad, like let's put it in songs, put it in music. And when we stop viewing it as such a bad thing, culture, I think, will stop viewing it as such a bad thing, and then we can just move past it. Because I think what matters more than what you say is how you talk to people. And I think a lot of people get caught up in cuss words because they don't want to, because it's easier to not cuss than to actually focus on how you talk to people.
There was something in that video, they said interactions with other people during the day, whether you're a believer or a non-believer, are what make or break your day, whether religious or not. It's your like human interactions with human beings, the things that you say, the words that you speak, the feelings that you share, the moments that you make,
Yeah, the one thing that I definitely like just attach on like what Alex was saying was that pretty much because innately cuss words really aren't like bad, especially if you're using them like in context. I personally don't, just me personally, I just don't. But if I hear like another Christian, like when Andy Mineo like said the D word, I wasn't like, Now, do I personally think that it was wise for him to do it? No, but I didn't see him any less.
You didn't judge him.
I didn't judge him because I see people for their soul, not their sin. I'm gonna be using that forever. But yeah, I see people for their soul, not their sin. I know that like, okay, yeah, like if you look at James, it says that pretty much like we should watch like our tongues and everything, and the Bible also like, so Matthew 12:36 and 37 pretty much says that we will be judged for every idle word that we speak. So every single word that we speak, like even if it's like a cuss word, like we'll be like judged for that, whatever. So the Bible says that if we should also like follow the law of the land, which pretty much like if society thinks that this is bad, then like it's wise to like if you want to represent God in a good way, then yeah, you should probably like abstain from it. But in and of itself, it's not really bad. It's just like, okay, we want to make sure that, because everywhere we're going, we're representing God. So if people think that it's bad, just like what Alex was saying, then that's why like I would personally avoid it, because like I was saying in James, like if you're a teacher, you're held to a higher standard. So you have to like set that representation
Right.
for it and everything. So that's why I said like, okay, it wasn't really wise for Andy to have done that. However, if you listen to the song Family Photo, he was expressing his authentic feeling. And I feel like him dropping that fits exactly what Alex is trying to say. Like, he putting that in there, it's like, whoa, it definitely caught your attention. But if you continue to pay attention to the message of that, my thought wasn't like, wow, he's a sinner. He's not a Christian anymore. My thought was like, wow, he must be really feeling something, yet he still continues to follow God. He still continues to want to impact. He still continues to like to do that. So that's like how I feel about it. And then all in all, I guess like just like to summarize, I just want us to like start looking at things like more differently. If God,
challenging ourselves.
Yes, challenge yourself. God is the greatest creator. Look at all of this that he's created. We don't have the best lighting right now, but you got go outside.
It's incredible lighting.
Look.
Do you see these greens and blues?
Yeah, but
Amazing.
like,
Look at the trees.
Oh, here we go again. Okay.
but God is literally the best artist ever. And if you want to represent him, you have to work on that craft.
Yeah.
You have to be able to show people that you are truly a reflection of Christ with your art too. Make your art great. Make your art just as good as you want your message to be, pretty much. Don't focus so much on the message that the art loses its taste, and don't do like vice versa. Try to do a good job in presenting both the message and the art in a very quality way. So that's my last 2 cents, and I want y'all to put your last 2 cents, and then we could like wrap it up.
I don't have any 2 cents yet, so go ahead.
Yeah, I really don't either. I think that's the main takeaway. Like I said, challenge yourself, and like Denzel said as well, challenge yourself if you're someone that's not doing these things, to push yourself outside of the box. If you are doing these things, do more of them. And if you're not doing these things at all and you're a non-believer, then realize there is a whole nother group or a whole nother side of Christianity that you might not have seen before. One thing I find in talking to non-believers, or that I've found in the past, is that the non-believers have either had something that's happened to them experience-wise that felt like that made them not believe in God, or they've had something happen by a believer in their life that made them not believe in God. But there are people that have had just as terrible things happen, or same situations, or Catherine Wolfe talks about using your pain for someone else's power, or using your hurt for someone else's healing. The point of the gospel is sharing our hurt and sharing our pains and sharing our struggles, that we have found salvation through and from those things, right? So if other people realize that that can be done, and that it's not about being perfect and being put into this category of perfectionism and Christianity. I often say that I'm not religious, that I am spiritual, because I do not like, and I believe in God. God is my savior, but I don't like the word religion, because religion to so many people, specifically non-believers, means rules.
Yeah.
So when do we pull ourselves, like I said, out of the box of rules and get into the relationship?
Yeah.
And not only your relationship with God, but form those relationships with people, whether it's a believer, whether it's a non-believer, whether it's an evangelist, whether it's I don't know, someone that preaches the opposite, like whatever it is, connect with human beings based on who they are as human beings, and not based on what they've done or what box they do or don't fit into.
That was a whole $20. I asked for 2 cents. You said you didn't even have that.
Okay, here's my $50. But kind of along the same lines, I think my last input would just be, don't box in beauty.
Wow.
And because beauty in and of itself, I think, glorifies God. And just as you guys have
God is beauty.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And just as you guys see nature and just see God through that, I'm not so much nature, but when I hear a really good melody, or when I read a really good story, to me that is beauty, and I see God all in that.
Yeah.
And so I think we should let beauty not fit into a certain Christian mold. And a good quote for this is from this same book, Chasing Francis. You should read this. This is what it says: beauty can break a heart and make it think about something more spiritual than the mindless routine we go through. Imagination is the stealth way into people's souls, a way to get all of us to think about God. For him, beauty was its own apologetic. And they go on to say that's why a church should care about the arts. And I think if I could update that based on our conversation, I think for the most part, church does care about the arts. But I think we should not box in the arts so much to fit a certain mold. And so, yeah, don't box in beauty. Let things go outside your box, and don't criticize, but just be willing to listen to things or read things that don't fit your mold, and if it doesn't fit your mold, cool. Like, you don't have to listen to it. You don't have to read it. Like,
yeah, you don't have to.
So
He had to one up my last comment. Make it better.
$50, cool. So, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. I know that, you know, I haven't been like on top of videos this summer, but great, here's a long one for you guys to like just keep on, you know, doing. I've been working so much with these guys to give you this content. So this week I'm putting out 3 different videos. Like, you guys should be excited. And I'm gonna get back on top of it, but thank you for watching. Please leave your comments. You guys know that I'm a discussion starter. I'm not saying like all of this is gospel, but it is. But you know, like, you know what I mean. Like, it's not. We're just stating like what we think, and we're so open to hearing you guys like opinions, feedback, all of that. Make sure that you follow them on Instagram. And continue to keep updated with the Ex Nihilo Collective, which is the collective that we're on. Follow that Instagram page as well. Be looking out for me posting out the performance and everything. I don't know when exactly I'm going to. I've already edited it, so I'm just gonna like have to find time to like upload it. But yeah, thanks again for watching, guys. Share this video with people. Start discussions. Let's change the world. Done.